Hello everybody! Have you ever used the defer block in your application? Well, despite that this is currently under developer preview, I have used that and I really like that. If you haven't seen my video where I explain how to use that, you can find it here. So if you have or haven't used that yet, you definitely need to know how to unit test that, right? And this is what we will see in this video. Without any further delay, let's get started. Since we are going to focus only on the unit test, we will use this file, the app-component-spec.ts, but we can even use any different spec.ts file. So what I have here is a before each, and what we will do is that we don't want this kind of code to run on every unit test. Instead, we will copy and paste this kind of code, the wait testbed configure testing module, on every unit test separate. And we will do that in a few seconds. So in this video, what we will see is the following. We will see how to use the defer using the when keyword, and let's say when something is visible. Then we will see how to use the defer on idle. So either using on idle or just defer, it's the same thing since on idle is the default action. And then we will also use defer on viewport. We'll use the defer on timer. And let's say we'll start by 1 second, and then we will also have the on interaction. We will see how to unit test the hover, on immediate, and last but not least, we will see how to unit test the nested defer blocks. So let's now start generating the test items. So here I would like to have just init, and I will write should pass having, and let's say that we will start by when is visible. Yeah, something like that. And we also need to have here the async. And let's see if the copilot will help us generate the rest of them. And yeah, we have on idle, the viewport, on timer, on interaction, hover, on immediate, and last but not least, we will have the nested defer blocks. So let's now do the following. Here, when is visible, what we said previously is that we don't want to rely on before each, but instead we would like to grab this code. I will copy and delete the before each, and I will paste it here. And I will explain later why we need to have this thing. And since now we will focus on each unit test separately, we need here to have also a component. So let me write the component in a fast forward, and I will explain what I'm doing. Well, this is it. So what we have here is the following. At first, the thing that we did previously, we have the configure testing module, and then we have here a component where we have it just into this unit test file, where we have the template, and we have just one button, and on click, we would like to toggle this isVisible variable from true to false and false to true. And then we're using the defer when is visible. And I have a typo here, it should be like that, yeah. And as soon as this is true, then we will display the empty defer block. And this is our class where we have this visible false. And then what we're doing is that we use the fixture where we use the testbed create component by using the dummy component, the class component that we have just created. And now let's see, how can we act now and make this visible? Well, since this relies into a click of the button, I guess that we can just grab the button by using the fixture debug element. And this is what we will do. Thanks, Copilot. We have fixture debug element, either native element query selector, or we can even use here the query, which is the same thing. And here we can use by CSS. So I will do that by.css, and inside here I will use this attribute. So we are querying the debug element by this attribute data test button is visible, which is this attribute here. And from this one, we can grab the native element. Nice. And we will just have now to dispatch a click event. So we will do a button, dispatch event, which event? The click event. And then since we have just clicked something, we have also to trigger the change detection. So for this one, I will do a fixture detect changes. And since we're using here the defer block, perhaps we'll have later on a component here, and we would like also to wait for any dependencies to be loaded. So we will also use the fixture when stable, just to make sure that everything are stable and we can use our assertion. And now in terms of assertion, what we can do is, let's say that I want just to grab my fixture, native element, dot inner HTML to contain, something like that. I will remove the div, I don't need that, and I will have this thing. I expect the fixture native element inner HTML to contain the empty defer block, which is this guy. So let's give it a try to see if this actually works. I will right click here, copy relative path, and then ng test, and I will include this path. And just to make sure that only this test will run, I will focus this guy and click enter. And it seems that it failed. We wouldn't expect that failed, and let's read here what we have. It says expected, and then we have here what got rendered, and it seems that we have the button, and then we have an empty container. Why is that? So when we unit test the defer blocks, we have to keep in mind that into the configure testing module, into the option, we have the defer block behavior. And this is, let me show you. We have the defer block behavior, and we have two options, manual and playthrough. If we go into this documentation, we can see that the manual, which is the default one, it actually says that we have to explicitly define which defer block we would like to test, and specifically which state we would like to render and test. And like I said, this is the default option. And then we have the other one, which is the playthrough, and this actually is the way that we have used to unit test, meaning that our code, it behaves like it is being rendered into the browser. So let's close that, and now instead of manual, I will switch back to playthrough. And as you can see now, we have here total 1 success. And it seems that we have a correct unit test in terms of when is visible. Nice. So let's now move on, and I will grab all of this code, and I will paste it here on the defer on idle. For this one, we do not have to have the button, and instead of having the when is visible, we need here to have on idle. And here we have the empty defer block. We no longer need to have the isVisible. We no longer need to have the button nor to dispatch any event. And now we need to find out what we have to do in terms of act. How can we unit test that? So let's first understand what is the underlying implementation of the idle. So this piece of HTML will be rendered into the browser when the request idle callback function triggers, which means that when the browser is idle, we will see that in our browser. So how can we do that? It seems that when we have an underlying implementation and when we are unit testing that, we will try to mock that. And let me ask you here, is it okay to mock the idle behavior? To be honest with you, perhaps there is an approach to mock that, and it also could be a verbose approach, and I wouldn't do that. I would prefer to rely not on the playthrough, but also to rely on the other one, which is the manual. And let me explain how this guy works. Like I said previously, what we have to do is that we have to explicitly pick the defer block where we want to unit test. What I mean with that is the following. Let's say that we have 3 different defer blocks. This is the first one, this is the second, and this is the third. And we have to say that I want now to unit test only this one or this or that. And also here into the defer block, we also have the placeholder. We also have the error, and we also have the loading, right? So let me type that. So something like that. So not only we have to specify which defer block to unit test, but we also have explicitly to define which state we would like to render. This is the complete state, this is the placeholder state, this is the error state, and this is the loading state. So let's see that in action. Into the act here, what I will do is I will use again my fixture, and there is one more method, and this is the get defer blocks. And please note that this returns a promise. So we'll have to have here an await. And since we would like to unit test the first defer block, which is this guy, then we're like, I want to grab the first item. So let's keep that into a defer fixture. And now having the defer fixture, we have to render a specific state. So I will use here the defer block state, and we can see that we have the complete, error, loading, or placeholder. So let's start with the complete. So as soon as we have this, then we are sure that this kind of code, this kind of HTML got rendered into the browser. So let's focus only into this unit test just to make sure that only this guy will run, and we can see that we have one success unit test. Nice. So let's now move on. I will grab again all of this code, and we will go this time into the viewport. So here we have defer on viewport, we have the manual, and we will see whether we need to have manual or playthrough here. And let me also change, instead of idle, I would like here to have my viewport. Let's remove all of these things. And I will also would like to focus only into that unit test. And it seems now that our unit test failed. So let's see what is the reason. It says that defer that has a placeholder. I didn't read the rest of that, but of course we need to have a placeholder here. So let's have a placeholder. And here I would like just to have a div with a placeholder, no more than that. And now we have a successful unit test. So it seems that manual works here, but before we move on, let's think of that a bit. Can we have a playthrough? So if we switch to that, and then if we remove this kind of code from here, our unit test got failed. How can we unit test now the viewport without having to get the specific defer block? The underlying implementation of the viewport is the intersection observer. So in this case, perhaps we would have also to mock the intersection observer. Perhaps there is implementation for that one, but I don't think that it's worth doing that, since this is not an actual user action. So I would prefer in this case to use only the manual. So again, let's grab this code and let's move on to the next unit test, which is our timer. So let's now do the following. Let's switch from manual to playthrough, and here we need also to have our timer of 1 second, and then we also have to remove these 2 lines. And it seems that we have a successful unit test, so let's focus into that one and see what is happening. And yeah, we have a successful unit test without changing anything. Well, the trick is happening with this guy when stable. And the reason is that it gets a promise that resolves when the fixture is stable. So it seems that this is waiting for our timer to finish. But let's say that we do not have this when stable. How can we unit test that now? So perhaps here we can use the fake async. So let's give it a try. A fake async here, and I will wrap all of my unit test into the fake async function. And I will now here have only my tick of 1 second. And it seems now that we have a successful unit test. How about if we had 100 milliseconds? We have a failed unit test. So even for the timer, it seems that it is okay to use the playthrough for the unit testing. So again, let's move on. I will grab all of this code and I will paste it into the next one, which is the on interaction. Again, I will give it a try to use playthrough here, and we need to have on interaction. And I would like to interact with a trigger point, and my trigger point will be just a button with a template reference variable of trigger, and we will have a data test attribute of button. I will name that interaction, and I don't need to have any click event. And let's say that here we have just the message interact. Nice. So we don't need to have tick here, and let's focus to this unit test. And we'll have a failed unit test, of course. So what we have to do is first grab this trigger, and let's do that by using the fixture.debug element. I would like to query by CSS, and this is the data test button interaction, and we are grabbing the native element. And this is our button, const button. And then we have to dispatch a new event, which event? The click event into that button. And it seems now that we have a successful unit test. So what we are doing is that we are clicking this button, and as soon as on interaction gets fired, we will have this kind of HTML template into the browser. And even for the interaction, it seems that playthrough is okay to use. And of course, if you would like, you can switch to manual, but it seems that since we have a user interaction here, I would prefer to go with playthrough. So again, let's grab all of this code and move on to the next one. And we will see now how to play around with hover. And again, the idea here is as soon as this trigger point, which is this button, is visible to the viewport, we would like to render these HTML lines to the browser. So we have here button interaction. Let's name that just for consistency, hover, and here hover here, something like that. And now we have our fixture and we have our button. So let's have this just button hover. We're grabbing the native element. This is okay. And we can see that we have a failed unit test. And the reason is that we are dispatching the wrong event here. Instead of click, we have to dispatch the mouse render. And now it seems that we have a successful unit test. And again, it seems that for the hover, we can use the playthrough. So let's copy this and move on to the next one, which is on immediate, which seems that we don't need to have the button, and here we have to have immediate. And we'll have the empty defer block, and let's see, we do not need to have the button nor the dispatch event. So for the on immediate, we have the playthrough here, and to be honest with you, I would expect to have a successful unit test rather than a failed unit test. So let's see what is happening here. We have the defer on immediate, which we expect to run that into the template execution. We have our fixture, we detect changes, and then we have when stable. It seems that this didn't work. Perhaps for this one we can use the manual, but I wouldn't like that to use manual for something that should be rendered into the template execution. So instead of using manual here, what we can do perhaps is wrap this into a fake async. Let's wrap everything here into the fake async, and I will replace the fixture detect changes with just a tick of 0. And it seems now that we have a successful unit test. So what is happening is that the when stable relies into the macro task queue, and the tick actually, and I would prefer having this one instead of manual. And again, let's grab this code and move on to the last unit test. And I'm glad that you made it till this moment to see this video. And let's see what we have. And what we said previously in the beginning of this video is that we will give it a try to have nested defer blocks. And nested defer blocks means that perhaps I want to have something like that. I have my defer block, and nested, I would like to also to have another defer block, which is the nested defer block. So how can we unit test this now? At first we have to pick the defer block behavior manual, and in this case we have to select the first defer block from the fixture. And please note, let me go up, this is our fixture. Actually the fixture is a combination of our code into the component and the template at the very first level. And we'll have this fixture, and this is at the 0 point, the first item, and then we'll have the nested items. The nested items, please note that are part of the complete state of this item. So as you can imagine, we'll have to pick the first one, and then we'll have to render the complete state. And then we can pick the defer fixture, and we can get the get defer blocks, which will return the nested defer block items. And again, this is a promise, so we'll have to have here an await, and let's grab the first item. And I will name that as a const nested defer block equal to something. And again, let's go up a bit to this template. Like we said, this is the first defer block, and this is actually the complete state of the first defer block, and this is the nested. And the nested defer block also has the index and also the state. So we'll have to render the complete state of that one as well. So from the nested defer block, we'll have to go and render the complete state. And as soon as we have that, let me also have an await. And as soon as we have that, then we can just pick the nested defer block and have that into our expectation. And let's see that. And it seems that we have a successful unit test. And just to make sure that everything works as expected, how about that gibberish? And it seems this is failed, and now we have a successful unit test. So that was it. We saw how to unit test the different actions of the defer block, and we also saw how to unit test the different states. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and do not forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.